Here is my review of Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix's film Joker, which I'll try to do without giving you any spoilers, in a vague and abstract way, focusing on it more as a political phenomenon and why it's caused such controversy and become an artifact in the cultural war, perhaps because of the nature of its take on mental illness, maleness. That's my dog. That's really helpful there. That's really helpful. And the kind of cultural tensions that currently exist around maleness. They're laid down. Don't be annoyed, you can be in here. But what's exciting about the film is it's very beautiful looking, in that it's macabre and disturbing and has a very evident and explicit visual homage to late 70s and 80s films, as people have said, like Taxi Driver and King of Comedy, which it refers to not least through its casting of Robert De Niro. Phoenix's performance as the maligned, repressed, continually suffering, mentally ill, neglected and invisible protagonist that will soon self-actualize as the Joker is fantastic because of his physical mobility, his sexiness, his intensity, his exquisite ability as a performer makes it impossible not to see it as a kind of endorsement of self-realization through the embrace of the shadow. Like that within each of us there is the kind of meek, gentle, sociable nature of the downtrodden, of the people that are exploited, and that beneath the surface of that is potentially an explosive, dark other waiting to be realized. I feel that the reason the film has caused so much controversy is that it is visually iconic and, in terms of its narrative, provocative in a way that one could imagine creating imitation, being attractive. You know, like that we recognize, obviously mostly through news coverage, the narrative of the lone shooter, the crazed gunman, the serial killer, these dark anti-hero narratives that exist in popular culture, and the way that they're played out, the way that we toy with the idea of the macabre, that these characters are attractive, but somehow all of us recognize that there is an aspect of ourselves that we're holding on to. Films like Falling Down, the Michael Douglas film, explored like what happens if we just don't take shit no more. We're not going to sit in traffic jams. We're not going to tolerate petty bureaucratic rules about what time breakfast is served at McDonald's. And what the film certainly does is takes the temperature of a particular moment where people, it seems to me at least, feel dissatisfied, oppressed and split. The plot of the film examines the way that an act of violence and psychosis becomes a flashpoint for a cultural movement that has a real vivacity and anger in it, a kind of kill the rich, occupy cubed type of movement that has like a kind of dark psychosis to it, and none of the gentility, reason and lighter side of the carnival that, say, the actual current Extinction Rebellion movements have, or the kind of earnestness of the Occupy movement. And by earnestness I mean that it was sincere and well thought out and based on economics and facts. And similarly with Extinction Rebellion, while like lots of people are negatively impacted by it with any kind of industrial action, that's the kind of the point. This film focuses on what would happen if, as one, people descended into their own madness, into their own darkness. As a only child of a single mother, coming from a background where we were not financially supported, then, you know, like the protagonist of this film, becoming a stand-up comedian, feeling maligned and outside of society, there were many touchstones for me, and I can see that a lot of people will identify it. I don't feel that it's explicitly or specifically about white males, although Joaquin Phoenix is both of those things. I feel that what's potentially conflagratory about the film is the way that it focuses on inequality and economic disparity as the tinderbox and the battleground upon which these social wars are fought, not around liberal ideas, around tolerance, say. Addressing the film addresses the simple fact, hey, there's all these people that feel that they've got no stake in society, that feel marginalized and maligned. What would happen if that exploded? It called to mind for me those riots in the UK in, I think, 2007, where the death of Mark Duggan in custody in Tottenham led to looting and rioting across initially London and then the country, which in the same way suggested that sort of cultural memes could explode behaviourally like a movement through a culture. That obviously, other than its ignition, didn't have a racial component but had a powerful economic component. And I'm beginning to sense that the reason that the film Joker is causing such controversy is because, yes, on the superficial level, the glamorization of violence, but as soon as you put violence in a film, you're glamorizing it because we're looking at it on a screen being rendered by beautiful and attractive, charismatic actors. I think that the reason, what it's got in addition to the problem of any violence, from Tarantino to Sergio Leone to whoever has put violence in films, and frankly, who hasn't, that the real problem is that it has as its central point it is providing a voice to something that isn't being correctly understood and addressed. And I believe that is the neglect of a particular portion of society. And again, in my opinion, that's not about race, because as I said, with those riots in 2007, that was multiracial, urban in origin, and affected young black and young white people that were living in an economic landscape that they couldn't afford to inhabit, being continually bombarded with images or marketing images that they couldn't respond to because they didn't have the resources. And this consumer culture has replaced ideologies that might give people a sense of connection and what do I want to say, virtue. That's what I think Joker's about, and that it's about the consequences of a nihilistic landscape. What happens if you strip a culture of meaning, strip back national identity around conventional and traditional roles, don't provide people with economic opportunity or social integration? What are the likely consequences? So even though it's a very glamorous sort of superhero movie in many respects, it, one way or another, captures a kind of flavour around a dark, nihilistic sense of anti-establishment realism. So I can see why this film has caused a lot of controversy. As well, I think it's one of those recent cultural artifacts that had an initial wave of condemnation from critics, which has been reported in some quarters as being an attempt to stymie its success, but then audiences have responded to it very positively. This too is interesting. The idea, which for me has been a sort of, at least in my opinion, a long-standing one, that the culture is feeding us ideas and beliefs that are not beneficial to the people for whom the stories are purportedly being told. We're being given stories that don't resonate with us. And of course, this is like made by Warner Brothers, a massive organisation that are probably owned by a massive telecommunications company or whatever. So it's hardly, truly it's not going to be an anarchic product. It's, how could it be? But in terms of the feeling that it describes, the mood that it conjures, it's dealing with something most apposite. In a way, for me, there's a kind of optimism to be found in it, because it, in a sense, toys with the idea that there could be a coalescence between various anti-establishment movements, whether they're from the right or the left, or from ecological, or based in ecological ideas, or based in identity politics ideas, that those things could come together and deal with the true issue that determines the type of cultures that, the anglophonic cultures that we're dealing with, presumably. I don't know, you might be watching this anywhere. And that is, who has power, who doesn't have power, how do you change that dynamic, what is required, and the continual threat, the continual tension between those that are governed and those that govern, which is, of course, that the governed can at any point explode into a radical action, and it's impossible to control it if it happens without, you know, enormous bloodshed. So, like, that's what's fascinating about the film, is it toys with some curious ideas that haven't been articulated in quite that way before. So those are my thoughts on Joaquin Phoenix and Todd Phillips's brilliant film Joker, and this is my dog Bear. You a good boy? Yes, of course you are. There is definitely a dog there. I don't know where the frame ends. Thank you. Hello, I'm doing these new videos more frequently now. Please hit the notification button at the end of this video, because then you'll get like a little bell when I post a new video, and I'd like you to get a little bell when I post a video. Then I can, I don't know, be buzzing away in your pocket. Sounds like I'd be like a little pocket mosquito. Anyway, subscribe, click the bell, because I want more people to watch the YouTube videos. You specifically.